She believed he was her soulmate. She tattooed his name across her chest. She sent him hundreds of messages every single day. But Braden Spiteri wasn't real, and the person behind the messages was someone she already knew. In August of 2013, 20-year-old Renae Marsden vanished near a cliff simply known as The Gap, a place already marked by too many tragic endings. What led her there wasn't a breakup or a single betrayal. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling of her reality, built on digital lies and emotional manipulation. This isn't just a story about catfishing, it's a story about how trust can be weaponized, and how love, when twisted by deception, can lead to irreversible consequences. As I take you through the final months of Renae's life, ask yourself, how could someone be so close, yet so hidden? And more importantly, could it happen again? Stay with me to uncover the full truth behind the name Braden Spiteri and the shadow that never should have been there. Join me for another ride through the odd, strange, and mysterious here at Odd Mystery Stories. Renae Marsden radiated warmth and optimism. Born in Sydney in 1992, she was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel lighter. Friends described her as bubbly, generous, and always ready with a smile. She worked as an administrator at a salon where she dreamed of one day becoming a hairdresser. Her days were filled with laughter, plans for the future, and the simple joys of making others feel good about themselves. Family was at the heart of Renae's world. She shared an unusually close bond with her mother, Teresa, texting her throughout the day about everything from work gossip to her dreams. Teresa wasn't just her mom, she was Renae's confidant, her anchor, and her best friend. Renae's devotion was so deep that she had a tattoo inked on her side for Mother's Day. Quote, "Life is beautiful because of you," followed by Teresa's name. Her stepfather, Mark, played an equally important role. After adopting his last name at 18, Renae considered Mark her real dad. The Marsden home was a place of laughter, support, and unwavering love. But Renae's trusting nature made her vulnerable. She wore her heart on her sleeve, craving connection and believing the best in people. Friends noticed how quickly she fell for new partners, sometimes missing warning signs because she wanted so badly to believe in love. Her openness was endearing, but it also left her exposed to those that didn't have her best interests at heart. Her first serious relationship was with Angus Young, who remembered her as, quote, bubbly, beautiful, kind, and optimistic. They talked about marriage, about children, about adopting a golden retriever, and building a future together. Even after that relationship ended, Renae's belief in the classic, quote, white picket fence dream never faded. She wanted a family, a partner, and the kind of life she'd always imagined. When Renae reconnected with her best friend, Camilla Ziden, after her breakup with Angus, it seemed like a chance to start fresh. Camilla encouraged her to meet new people and put herself back out there. No one could have guessed how this friendship would shape in the months ahead. By the summer of 2013, Renae was swept up in a new romance with a man named Braden Spiteri, a man she'd never met in person, but who seemed to share her hopes for the future. She told her family about him with excitement, convinced she'd finally found someone who understood her. There was just one strange detail. Braden was in prison, claiming he'd wrongly been convicted. Renae believed she could help him and that connection was real, even as her family grew uneasy. The relationship consumed her. She sent hundreds of texts a day, talking endlessly about the life they'd build together. When her family asked to see photos or to chat with Braden, there was always an excuse. Prison restrictions, bad signal. Renae's happiness seemed genuine, but her loved ones couldn't shake their doubts. By August, Renae had Braden's name tattooed across her chest in an elaborate script, a permanent symbol of her devotion. She spoke constantly of their future, never suspecting that the man she loved was nothing more than a phantom. The truth was even closer to home than anyone realized. What happened next would unfold against the backdrop of The Gap, a place infamous in Sydney for its tragic reputation. Nearly 50 people a year are lost to its cliffs. Renae's story, so full of promise, was about to become a cautionary tale. And it all started with a romance that existed only through a screen. Braden Spiteri was everything Renae thought she wanted, on paper at least. His story was tragic. A young man serving time in Goulburn jail after a motorcycle accident that killed his best friend Richie. He painted himself as someone misunderstood, remorseful, and lonely. For Renae, who always tried to see the best in people, Braden's tale pulled at her heart. She wanted to believe she could help him, that their connection was special. Every detail of Braden's life was carefully constructed. His Facebook profile showed a handsome, approachable guy, except the photos actually belonged to Cameron Lang, a real person with no idea his face was being used. Each post, each message was tailored to reinforce the illusion. When Renae's family asked to see proof, she'd show them Braden's profile, never suspecting anything was amiss. Their relationship never moved beyond the screen. The only contact was through text messages and Facebook Messenger. Records would later show up to 170 text messages exchanged in a single day, starting early and stretching late into the night. Whenever Renae asked for a phone call or a visit, there was always a reason it couldn't happen. Braden claimed strict prison rules and said mobile phones were illegal inside. Sometimes he'd say he was getting a phone smuggled in through an attorney just to keep the hope alive. These excuses seemed plausible, especially to someone who wanted so badly to believe. Renae's devotion grew quickly. She tattooed Braden in an ornate script across her chest, with Camilla, her best friend, right beside her at the tattoo parlor. The tattoo was more than a symbol of love. It was a sign of how deeply she'd become entangled in the fantasy. At the same time, she started to pull away from her old dreams. Instead of talking about moving out and sharing a flat with her cousin Stephanie, she focused almost entirely on Braden and their imagined future together. It wasn't just love that kept Renae hooked. Braden's messages became more controlling as the months passed. He discouraged her from seeing friends, saying they didn't understand what they had. He alternated between overwhelming affection and sudden coldness, classic tactics to keep someone off balance. If Renae questioned anything, he'd shower her with affection until she apologized, making her feel guilty for doubting him. Then came the breaking point. On August 30th, 2013, Braden sent the text message, quote, "I think I need a break, and so do you." The timing was brutal. Renae had court that day for a minor charge, and the added stress left her especially vulnerable. Friends and family would later wonder if this was a calculated move, designed to hit her when she was at her lowest. After that message, Renae's world seemed to collapse. She told friends Braden had given her an ultimatum, but when her mother tried to comfort her, Renae could only cry. The person she'd trusted most had vanished, and the digital silence was deafening. But the story didn't end with a single text. The days that followed revealed just how tightly Renae had been caught in the web, and how the lines between love, control, and manipulation had blurred beyond recognition. Behind the endless stream of text messages and late-night direct messages, a much darker reality was unfolding. The connection Renae felt with Braden was built on constant, relentless communication. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes up to 170 text messages in a single day, from early morning until late night. Over a 3-month period, the tally reached more than 11,000 messages. This wasn't just a romance, it was a full-time occupation that left little space for anything or anyone else in Renae's life. Braden's messages were never just about love. He'd erupt over minor things like Renae chatting with coworkers or spending time with family. It went further than simple jealousy. For example, after Teresa liked one of Renae's Facebook posts, Braden accused her mother of being an unfit parent, turning even an innocent online gesture into points of conflict. Friends saw the toll it took. Renae constantly checked her phone, anxious to keep Braden happy and avoid his outbursts. The more she tried to please him, the more isolated she became. The power Braden held over Renae wasn't lost on her mother, Teresa. She read some of his messages and found them arrogant and at times cruel. Teresa's concerns grew, and she gently suggested to Renae that this relationship might not be what it seemed. But by then, the manipulation had sunk in. Braden convinced Renae that her family just didn't understand that their bond was something no one else could appreciate. It's a classic tactic, turning a victim against those who care most. A clear sign of Braden's influence came in January of 2012 when Renae visited a tattoo parlor with Camilla and had Braden's initials inked into her chest. Camilla, the person who would later be revealed as the one behind Braden's messages, was there the whole time, encouraging her. This wasn't just about love, it was about control, about making sure Renae's loyalty was visible and permanent. The manipulation only escalated. In August of 2012, Braden claimed he was about to be released on parole, filling Renae with hope. Then, just as quickly, he said he'd been rearrested on false charges, yanking her back into uncertainty. This cycle of hope and disappointment kept Renae emotionally tethered, always chasing the next promise, always desperate to fix things. By summer 2013, Braden's demands shaped Renae's every move. He wanted to know where she was at all times. If she didn't respond fast enough, he'd send a barrage of angry text messages. Renae would panic if her phone battery ran low, terrified of missing a text. The tattoo on her chest was no longer just a symbol of love. It was a mark of how deeply she'd been drawn in. All of this built to a breaking point. The digital walls around Renae closed in, leaving her exhausted, anxious, and alone. And just as her world seemed most fragile, a single message would arrive, one that would change everything. On August 5th, 2013, around 1 p.m., everything changed for Renae Marsden. The text message arrived while she was at work, and it said, quote, "I think I need a break and so do you." 10 simple words, but they hit with the force of a wrecking ball. Renae's co-worker Joseph watched as she broke down instantly, crying, hands trembling, unable to steady herself. This wasn't just heartbreak, it was the sudden collapse of the only world she'd come to trust. That evening, Renae returned home to her mother. Teresa, who immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. Renae kept repeating that Braden had given her an ultimatum, prove her love or lose him. When Teresa tried to reach her, Renae shook her head and sobbed. The timing couldn't have been worse. Already weighed down by the stress of her upcoming court appearance, Renae now faced the loss of the person she believed would be her future. As the hours passed, Renae's pain only deepened. Her behavior turned erratic and desperate. She told Teresa she didn't want to go on. Teresa, alarmed by the seriousness of her daughter's voice, tried to comfort her while also reaching out to Braden herself. The response she received was chilling in its detachment. Quote, "She's threatening to kill herself." No comfort, no concern, just cold words from the other end of the screen. The psychological toll was immense. Experts say that when a relationship built on manipulation ends abruptly, the fallout can be devastating. Renae had poured everything into Braden, her time, her trust, her sense of self. With the breakup, all of that vanished, leaving her feeling worthless and utterly alone. The hope she'd clung to was gone, replaced by a crushing sense of betrayal and abandonment. It wasn't just the end of a romance, it was the erasure of her entire emotional foundation. At 9:30 that night, she sent her mother a final message. Quote, "I love you, Mom. You're my best friend. I'm sorry." She also texted Camilla, "I love you and I'm sorry." The words were simple, but the pain behind them was unmistakable. Love and apology tangled up in a last goodbye. Then she drove to the Gap. The infamous Sydney Cliffs, known for their dark history. Renae's car was found parked at the edge. Inside were her phone, her purse, and her keys. There was no note, only those final text messages. Police believed the Tasman Sea carried her away. Her body was never found. The choice of the Gap wasn't random. It's a place people go to when they feel there's no way out. For Renae, boxed in by lies and emotional manipulation, it seemed like the only escape from her pain. As the hours stretched into days, Teresa waited for news that would never come. The digital fantasy that had consumed Renae's life ended with a silence that echoed through her family and friends. But as the investigation began, one thing quickly became clear. The man Renae had loved didn't exist, and the truth about who was behind the messages was about to come to light. The investigation that followed pulled back the curtain on a deception more personal and calculated than anyone imagined. Police quickly realized there was no Braden Spiteri in any Australian prison. The photos Renae had shared with her family were traced to Cameron Lang, an unsuspecting man whose images had been lifted from social media. Lang had no idea his face was being used for this way. He wouldn't find out until years later when detectives contacted him during their search for answers. Digging into the digital trail, detectives found that the phone number used by Braden was linked to a prepaid SIM card. Purchase records and phone data pointed straight to Camilla Ziden, Renae's former best friend and close girlfriend. Camilla had been living under the same roof as Renae, sharing meals with her family, all while orchestrating the cruel hoax from just a room away. On September 23, 2013, police served Camilla with a search warrant and seized 3 phones from her possession. Though the crucial SIM card was missing, even without it, the evidence was overwhelming. The coroner's inquest into Renae's death left little room for doubt about Camilla's role. The coroner described Camilla's testimony as, quote, nothing but a pack of lies. She noted she was, quote, unaffected by Renae's distress. The inquest concluded that Camilla had created Braden's persona to control Renae and to isolate her from real relationships. When their friendship soured, Camilla used Braden to exact what the coroner called her ultimate revenge by making Braden break Renae's heart. The manipulation wasn't about money or a simple prank. It was psychological warfare, fueled by jealousy and a need for control. Camilla's methods were disturbingly thorough. She maintained a second phone to keep Braden's persona alive, even researching prison protocols so her excuses would sound convincing. Witnesses described how Camilla could be seen laughing at her phone one moment and then turning to comfort Renae the next, playing both sides of the drama she had created. She positioned herself as the only person who truly understood Renae, deepening the isolation and making Renae more dependent on her. The timing of the final breakup message was no accident. Camilla knew Renae's vulnerabilities. She understood the stress of the upcoming court appearance and chose that moment to deliver the blow. The coroner's findings made it clear. Camilla watched Renae's agony unfold in real time, never intervening and never revealing the truth. Despite the mountain of evidence, Camilla faced no criminal charges. The law at the time had no provisions for prosecuting someone who used digital deception to inflict this kind of harm. The Marsden family was left to grapple with a loss that felt both senseless and avoidable. What happened in the aftermath forced everyone to confront a difficult question. How could such a devastating betrayal escape justice? In the aftermath of Renae Marsden's death, the Marsden family confronted not just personal loss, but the stark reality of a system that had no way to answer for what had happened. The legal void was undeniable. In 2013, Australian law offered no clear path to hold someone criminally responsible for catfishing, even when the deception was extreme and as destructive as what Camilla Ziden carried out. The law simply hadn't kept pace with the reality of online abuse. The only statute prosecutors could even consider was the Federal Carriage Services Act, which makes it an offense to use phones or the internet to menace, harass, or offend. But this law is typically reserved for direct threats or explicit harassment. Camilla's campaign was more insidious, a years-long manipulation that left no single message that could be called a threat. The maximum penalty under this law is 3 years in prison, but it doesn't address the full gravity of psychological abuse that leads to tragedy like Renae's. There was no charge for emotional manipulation, no statute for constructing a fake identity to control and isolate someone until they broke. The coroner's inquest laid bare the facts. Camilla's testimony was described as, quote, nothing but a pack of lies, and her actions were directly linked to Renae's heartbreak and taking of her own life. Yet, none of this translated to criminal charges. Camilla never faced court, never had to answer for the harm she caused. The Marsden family was left with the knowledge that the person who orchestrated Renae's torment would walk away untouched by the law. This wasn't just a gap, it was a chasm. The law recognized physical violence as a crime, but when the abuse was digital, psychological, and rooted in deceit, victims were left unprotected. Camilla's actions fit the pattern of coercive control, a form of domestic violence that can be just as deadly as physical harm. But because the manipulation happened online and through a fake persona, the law saw no crime. Determined to make sure no other family would face the same injustice, the Marsdens began fighting for Renae's law. Their campaign echoed in their Change.org petition, called for new legislation to criminalize prolonged and deceitful impersonation that causes psychological or physical harm. They wanted the law to recognize that emotional abuse, especially when delivered through calculated deception, can destroy lives. The family pushed for recognition that digital impersonation, when used as a weapon, should be treated as a serious criminal offense. There has been some progress. In 2022, the New South Wales introduced new coercive control legislation aiming to address patterns of controlling and abusive behavior. But even these reforms stop short of covering cases like Renae's, where the abuse is built on digital lies and manipulation rather than direct threats or violence. The law is evolving, but it's still not enough. Renae's case has become a rallying point for legal reform, shining a light on just how far the system has to go to protect people from online manipulation. The Marsden family's fight is a reminder that, without real consequences for catfishing and emotional abuse, the risk remains and the damage continues. You might expect that such a high-profile tragedy would cause real change, but as time passes, the question lingers. Have we learned anything, or are we still leaving people vulnerable to the same dangers that took Renae's life? Instead of fading into the background, Renae Marsden's story remains a vivid reminder of dangers that can hide behind the screen. At the Gap, where nearly 50 people a year are lost to despair, her case stands out for its chilling mix of digital deception and emotional manipulation. It's not just a story about one victim and one perpetrator, it's a warning about how easy it is for trust to be weaponized in the digital age. The patterns that trapped Renae are now well recognized: isolation from friends and family, relentless messaging, and endless excuses for why a relationship can't exist in the real world. Braden's tactics, discouraging Renae from seeing loved ones, demanding hundreds of text messages a day, inventing prison rules to avoid meeting, are classic signs of control. These red flags are easy to spot in hindsight, but in the moment, they can feel like proof of love and devotion. What makes these schemes so dangerous is how plausible they sound. Catfishers don't just invent wild stories, they pick believable details. Maybe it's a job overseas, a family emergency, or a supposed legal barrier. These lies are just close enough to reality that even smart, caring people can get caught. Renae's case proves that vulnerability isn't about weakness, it's about being open to connection, which manipulators know how to exploit. Digital safety experts stress that one of the simplest ways to protect yourself is to verify who you're talking to. A reverse image search on profile photos can expose stolen identities in seconds. If someone refuses to meet on video or always has an excuse, that should be a major warning sign. Even with new tricks like deepfakes, skepticism, and a willingness to check the facts are powerful tools. The psychological fallout from these betrayals often lingers long after the messages stop. Victims like Renae aren't just left with broken hearts, they're left questioning their own judgment and struggling to trust again. Some develop anxiety around new relationships or social media, while others blame themselves for missing the signs. The emotional scars are deep, and they don't heal quickly. Legal reform still lags behind technology. Even with new coercive control laws in New South Wales, most cases hinge on how prosecutors interpret the statutes, and emotional harm alone isn't always enough. Meanwhile, social media platforms continue to be slow at verifying accounts and removing fakes, leaving users exposed while the damage is already done. Renae's betrayal was especially devastating because it came from someone so close. The manipulation didn't start as a grand scheme, it crept in slowly, building over time until it was too late to escape. That's often how these stories unfold. Small lies snowball, boundaries blur, and the truth gets buried under layers of digital fiction. Mental health professionals now urge friends and family to pay close attention to loved ones who seem trapped in online relationships. Direct questions. Have you seen them on video? Can you meet them in person? Do their stories add up? Can sometimes break the spell before it's too late. Intervention matters, but so does a culture that encourages skepticism and open conversation about digital risks. It's hard to shake the sense that Renae's tragedy could have been prevented with better laws, stronger platform safeguards, or just a little more awareness. Her family's push for Renae's law is a step forward, but real progress demands a shift in how we approach online relationships. Until we learn to balance trust with caution, the risks remain, and the lessons of Renae's story go unheeded. Her story continues to echo, a warning that the dark side of digital connections is never far away. Renae Marsden's death was ruled as no foul play. But once the truth behind Braden's Spiteri unraveled, that explanation didn't feel like the full story. There was no physical violence, no arrest, no trial, and yet a young woman's life ended because of a lie, one that was meticulously constructed and emotionally devastating. The person behind Braden's identity has never faced charges. They remain protected by legal definitions that don't fully recognize the harm of psychological manipulation or coercive control. Renae's parents, Teresa and Mark, continue to push for laws that reflect the reality of what happened to their daughter, because emotional abuse, even when invisible, can be every bit as destructive. But here's the question we're left with. When someone deliberately creates a web of lies that leads to a breaking point, should they be held responsible? This isn't just a story about a fake profile. It's a warning about how far emotional deception can go when there are no consequences. And it asks us all to consider, how do we protect others from being pushed too far by someone hiding behind a screen? Do you believe digital manipulation should carry legal weight? Should emotional abuse online be treated as more than just a personal matter? Let me know in the comments. To Renae's family, your strength in sharing her story ensures her name will never disappear into silence. She mattered, and the truth still matters too. Hey, thanks for sticking with me through another odd mystery. My name is Vince. If you enjoyed this story and want to help keep the channel going, consider buying me a coffee or joining the Patreon crew. Even a few bucks goes a long way toward uncovering more strange and unsolved cases. Patreon members get special recognition for subscribing. Some even see the research notes on what's coming next. And more members even help pick the next case. You'll find links in the description. Thanks again for watching. Stay curious and stay safe. Thank you.